Hey guys, Lee Reddit here with you again, Shipyard Training and Employment. This week we're going to talk about hand tools. When you complete this session, you should be able to explain how to use various types of hand tools and how to identify and explain the use of various types of hammers, demolition tools, chisels, punches, screwdrivers, adjustable and non-adjustable wrenches, types of sockets, pliers, wire cutters, measuring tools, different types of measuring tools, levels and layout tools. Excuse me. Now, there are multiple types of hammers, but the average hammer that we use in the shipyard industry is either a ball peen hammer or a sledgehammer. Now, ball peen hammer has a round face on one end and a flat face on the other end. And a sledgehammer can either have what is called a cross peen, meaning it's got a sledge head, usually larger than a ball peen, and it has a flat surface on either a double face sledgehammer or a single face, which is a cross peen, which has a bevel on one side and flat on the other. That's for different uses. Now, chisels, there are multiple types of chisels. We have pneumatic chisels that you can use in an air gun. We have hand chisels. There are different sizes depending on what you're trying to use it for. The way a chisel is designed, it has a bevel on the end for cutting, and then there is a flat side and then a more beveled side. The sharper bevel goes on the bottom, and that way you can actually control how much of the material that you want to take out as you strike it with a hammer, like I said, ball peen or a sledgehammer. But that would be your average. Cold chisel is for working with metal. We don't use many wood chisels in the shipyard industry. And then you have center punches. Okay, well, when we say chisels and punches, most people will think a center punch is it. There's a prick punch, a center punch, and a tapered punch. The center punch and the prick punch are very similar for marking a hole or marking a spot where we're either identifying where we're going to cut a line. We don't want it to go away, so we put marks on the metal. The tapered punch is something that we would use if we had two holes that was drilled, let's say in a flange, and it didn't line up, the bolt holes were off center, and we couldn't put the bolt in it. What we would do is put a tapered punch in there, and once you get it started, you can drive that in, and it will actually line your holes up. And from there, you can put your hardware in and then remove the punch. But a tapered punch, also known as a drift pin, there's some other things that they use for lining holes up as well. We're not going to go into right now. Screwdrivers. The standard screwdriver that we use is either a slotted, Phillips, or an Allen. But you should know, if you come across a Torx or a Robertson, which is a square. Torx is kind of like, you might know it as a star. And then there's also a clutch drive. Clutch drive they use sometimes in heads, which is the bathroom on a ship. So it can only turn one way. You can't take it back out. But when you're using a screwdriver, you should always have a proper fit. You don't want to use a very small screwdriver on a larger slotted head, or with the same thing with the Allen. Of course, it won't fit it, but even the Phillips head, If you use a small Phillips head on a larger Phillips head screw, you can't get any torque on it, and so therefore it's not effective. And then you have wrenches. Now there's several types of wrenches. You have offset wrenches. You have what they call a box wrench or speed wrench, which is like a ratchet wrench that you don't have to take it off. It just has a ratcheting mechanism inside of it. Offset, of course, is what it says is what it is. It would be an offset wrench, where if you were trying to get over something and had to get to the nut or bolt, you have a little bit of an offset on the wrench. Generally called a box end wrench. Some of them are straight, some of them are offset. Combination wrenches, different sizes on each end. Also, combination wrench could be open on one end, boxed on the other end. Of course, the difference in open and box is, if it's an open end wrench, that means that you could slide it over top there. And if it was a boxed end wrench, then it would be solid all the way around, and you would have to put that onto the bolt or nut, depending on which one you're working with. Generally, you have a wrench or a wrench and a socket on the opposite sides, so you can either tighten or loosen the bolts. Then you have adjustable wrenches. There are several different types of adjustable wrenches. There are smooth jaw, what they call adjustable wrench. You might know it like you would think of it as a pipe wrench. Pipe wrench generally has a adjustable lock nut on the end of it, and then the what you know is an adjustable wrench usually has a smooth jaws. Sometimes they are different sizes. You can get 6-inch, 8-inch, 10, 12, depending on how big of a boat you're working on. You want to try to get a wrench that's generally, could you use a larger wrench on a smaller nut or bolt? Yes, if you can fit it on there, it'll go all the way down till it closes. But generally, if you're using it on a small boat, a 7/16, 3/8, you'll use a 6 or an 8-inch adjustable wrench. Pipe wrenches are good for, and it's got a jaw, fixed jaw on one side, and then it has ridges that'll actually grip onto a pipe. When you put pressure down on it, it'll grip onto the pipe and turn it. They use it to put the what they call union nuts on pipes, or to have two pipes, you need to take them apart or take the end off of it. Sometimes it's fittings. It could be a union which just goes straight over it. It could be a 90-degree fitting that goes on the end and it'll be threaded. You need to take that off. You would use a pipe wrench. Also it's called an adjustable wrench. And then the sockets that we use. Generally, we use between 3/8 and 1 1/8 is a standard socket set. Some people will tell you 3/8 to 3/4. I've seen so many times when I needed a 7/8 or 1-inch or 1 1/8 inch bolt, even working with sheet metal. You will find that on some of your blowers, some of your fan coil units. You'll have larger bolts on there. Machinists would use a much larger wrench at times. They could use smaller wrenches also, but at times they will get up in the 2.5 inch wrenches. They could be boxed inch. They have what they call slugging wrenches, where it's actually got an end where it's made to hit with a hammer. Because as a standard rule, you're not going to hit your ratchet handle with a hammer. But that's back to the wrenches. So, and then you have universal joints, which gives you some flexibility. If you can't get the socket to go straight onto the bolt, you might put in a universal joint. Sometimes it's a little bit deeper. Let's say there's a flange and then your bolt is down here 2 and 3 inches down. You might put an extension on there to get the socket down to where you want to get to it. But I would say, in general rule, I would have a 3/8 and a 1/2 inch drive ratchet with a set of sockets from 3/8 to at least 1 inch. A lot of times you'll have a 1 1/8, 1 1/4. So it would be a good thing to have those as well. And then you have torque wrenches. You're not going to use a torque wrench a lot, but there is a standard that says to torque the wrench to a certain amount of pressure, 60 pounds of pressure, 80 pounds, 100 pounds, but it will give you a guideline as to how much torque you should put on the bolt. Then you have pliers. Well, I think everybody knows that there's a standard pliers like we use at home, which would be a slip joint, and then it's got curved jaws to it. And then you have wire cutting pliers. They're usually used by electricians. They have a wire cutter on the throat, and then they have a gripping pliers that will shut very tight for twisting wires and things like that. They are not a slip joint pliers. They are a fixed plier. Then you have a pivot, which is that's what they are, is a pivot joint. You have needle nose pliers. Then you have an adjustable called a tongue and groove pliers, which you may know as a channel lock. So what that does is it allows you to open it from a smaller amount, and then as you go down the channel, you could open the jaws up to a much wider point. Then you have locking pliers. You might know those as vice grips. Vice grip is a manufacturer name. Other companies make locking grip pliers as well, but of course those, once you put it on the bolt, you can clamp it down. It is a spring lock, and it holds it much tighter. So that's another thing. Then you have measuring devices. Well, there are two common measuring devices that we use would be a stick ruler or a tape measure. Now, why would you use either one over the other? When would one apply and the other one not? If you're measuring something that's beyond 6 feet, period, if it's over 6 feet long, you might use a tape measure. And the reason why, because stick rulers are generally 6 feet long. But if you want to get a very accurate measurement, the end on a tape measure has a tendency to be a bit flexible. They get worn and used. The end can actually bend some. It could be off by a 1/16 very easily. It's not as accurate as a stick ruler. A stick ruler, once you put it on there, that's a very accurate measurement. Now, and then there's other measuring tools. When you get down to critical measurements, they use what they call a mic, which is to tell you the exact down. It can go down to the hundredths and even thousandths of an inch. So you think about having 100 parts to 1 inch or 1,000 parts to 1 inch. That's a very detailed measuring tool. It can measure on the inside or the outside. But the general thing that we use would be a tape measure. A 25-foot tape measure would be a very useful tool when working on a ship. A lot of times you're going to measure in spaces from frame to frame where to install things, and it might go 10 to 20 feet very easily. Where if you was using a 6-foot stick rule or a 10-foot tape measure, you're going to have to keep moving that along. So a 25-foot tape measure would be a very common tool. Then we have levels. We don't use levels when a ship is in the water. Okay? But if a ship is in dry dock, we have self-leveling levels. You can put it, if it's on an angle, you can put it on there and it will automatically level itself. You can move that over and that will transfer that line. We also use laser levels at times. But as an entry level, I would not be concerned about having a level or using a level. But I like for you to understand how a level works. So if you look at the slide, it's going to tell you there's what they call a bubble, which is an air bubble. It's got fluid in a little cylinder, and the air bubble needs to be in the middle. It's got a line on each end. You get your air bubble in the middle, and that's when you know it's level. Now, do levels get off? Yes. How do you check your level? Well, you put a mark on it, make a T. We'll call T for top. You take and draw you a line with your level, put the bubble in the middle, make sure it's very accurate, put you a line on there, flip the level over and put the T on the bottom. If that line is not perfect, lined up, then your level is out of kilter, meaning that something's happened with your cylinder, is moved a little bit one way or another. Sometimes you can even get adjustable levels where you can adjust that and fix it. Most of the time we get fixed levels, but they do get damaged. So that's how you check it to make sure. You would not want to use a level for a whole bunch of stuff and then come to find out everything that you made was just a little bit off, because this is what happens when it's 1/8 of an inch out of level over 2 feet. Well, that doesn't seem like it's very much. But when you take that 2 feet and transfer it out to 20 or 30, 40 feet, that 1/8 of an inch becomes 1.25 inches. So you can multiply how far. If it went 1/8 of an inch off every foot, then 2 foot, it'd be 1/4 inch, 3 foot, and on and on and on. So you can figure that out. Then you have a square. We use a combination square the majority of the time. You have a framing square. Not very common, but we do use them. It's just for squaring things. If you want to make a straight line, you got something that goes across. This is a 90-degree angle. You line that up on one side, it makes a straight line, it makes it square for marking, either laying off things or for cutting. You would use a square. The combination square is much more useful. It's smaller. They're usually only 1 foot long. But they have an adjustment on there where you can adjust the ruler on there, and you can make it so you can use it as a scribe. If you want to describe something at 3 inches, you could put 3 inches on your combination square and draw you a long line on there. You can also use the opposite side, which is a 45-degree angle. So you have a 90-degree, okay, which is a straight corner line like this, and then you have a 45-degree, which means you would still put your line on there straight, but it'd make it a perfect 45 degree. So if you had 2 pieces at 45 degrees, that would make a 90-degree corner. But 45 degrees is a very common thing. Then we have a chalk line. Chalk line is simply to make a reference line over a long distance. I mean, you can use it for a couple feet if you wanted to, but generally, if you're trying to get a straight line, you've got your measurements laid out, and you want to be 1 foot, let's say, off of the bulkhead or the wall, okay, and you measure back 1 feet, and you want that line to be 1 foot, 20 feet across, then you would take your chalk line, mark your 1 foot here, go to the 20-foot mark your 1 foot there, and then you would pull the chalk line across. That'll make a straight line. You pull it very tight and then pop it. It's got chalk on it. When you pop the line, that makes your line, so you have a reference line to go off of. Cutting and shaping tools or other common hand tools, that's what we'll talk about on the next section. So what I want you to do is download the slides on the link below, and you'll be able to follow along with each thing that we talked about today. And whatever questions you have, send me an email, and we'll go from there. But that's it for today, guys. We've talked about multiple hand tools that you would use as a common tool in the shipyard trade. I hope you have learned something today, and y'all stay safe.